Good morning, everybody. It's David coming to you today from our third story deck here in Dallas, Texas. I'm home this week, which is pretty rare. I leave Sunday for Seattle, but I will be home this week. And it's going to be about 80 degrees here in February in 2017 today. Just crazy, crazy weather. What I wanted to do, we just finished lesson 4. I just finished grading your lesson 4 course projects, and I wanted to kind of go back and talk to you a bit about strategic plans and the narrowing process that happens in strategic plans, and then give you a few tips as we start the process of the last couple of weeks here to make sure that you're still focused on the right things going forward, and to give you a couple of tips there. So let's talk a bit about strategic plans in general. This is a 6-step strategic planning process. As you recall from the very first week, you provided an overview of the company, but then you started in lesson 2 looking at the external environment. The external environment is very, very broad. I mean, this would be all those things associated with governments and technology innovation, social issues, and those types of things that are not specific to the company that you chose, but are just specific in general to everyone. Specific in general. That doesn't make sense, does it? But are general to everyone. And so it's very, very broad. And strategic plans, by their very definition, begin to narrow that focus, which you did beginning in lesson 3, as you looked at the internal analysis, which is specific to the company that you chose. So the external environment, while it looks at opportunities and threats on the outside, the internal environment looks at strengths and weaknesses on the inside. And so you could see how the walls are beginning to narrow a bit on on the way that you look at that. And then this week in lesson 4, as you analyze the external environment, as you analyze the internal environment, you come up with some strategic issues. There are things that you've identified that look at and go, unless that opportunity or threat are recognized and some sort of contingency is made for those, they could impact the future both positively and negatively for that company going forward. The same thing for the internal environment. The strategic issues that you see in the internal environment are the strengths that you can leverage to hopefully build a strong future for the company, or a weakness that you need to mitigate in order to make sure that the company is strong going forward as well. And so that was this particular week in lesson 4. Now, next week what you're going to do is you're going to narrow it even further. You're going to take those strategic issues that you've identified and come up with some strategic alternatives. And this is where you have to begin to get much, much, much more specific. I've seen a lot of strategic plans before that it's just like apple pie. It's like, we need to do more marketing. Well, what do you mean specifically? If you take that to a board of directors, if you take that to a president, they're going to throw you out of the room because they're going, gee, okay, tell me specifically what I need to do. And so rather than say we need to do more marketing, you may need to say we need to institute a social media marketing plan that encompasses these 5 types of things. And so that's one of the big challenges that you have and that you'll have going forward here. And you'll see in my comments all the time, you need to be specific, because, again, generalities do not carry any weight at all in organizations. You'll just get thrown out of the room. And that's not a lot of fun. It's probably not what you want to do. And so coming up in lesson 5, you're going to begin that narrowing process even further to come up with some strategic alternatives. All right? And then, so you're going to have this basket of alternatives that you're going to put this week. And then in lesson 6, you're going to narrow it even further to come up with strategic recommendations. Let's face it, you're going to have many more alternatives than you will have recommendations, because all companies do not have the financial resources to do everything that they need to do. All companies do not have the human resources to be able to do what they need to do. And all companies just cannot bite off all of that, all of the things that you see in one year, or what's going to happen is that nothing's going to get accomplished. And so that's why in lesson 6, you actually come up with specific recommendations, which is a further narrowing. Many times you may have only 3 or 4 or 5 specific recommendations that you're going to bring forward to the company. And sometimes these are things that may not be the most important, but they're the easiest to execute. And so you need to balance those as well. And then in lesson 7 is implementation. So now that you've given them recommendations, how are you going to implement it? How are you going to follow up? What mile markers are you going to put in place to be there? So the key message that I want to make sure that you fully understand is that specifics have to be done. You have to be very specific. Now, some of you are going to see this week some comments that I made on your papers with strategic issues. And so in your paper, you would list strategic issue 1, strategic issue 2, strategic issue 3. Don't do that. Instead of doing that, name the issue. Because think about this. You're going to have a boss, a client, or someone who's going to be reading through this, and you want to make it as easy as you possibly can for them to fully understand what you believe the strategic issue is. So your heading needs to state the issue. So if the issue is social media marketing, don't put issue number 1 or strength number 1 or weakness number 1. Put social media marketing. Those things jump off the page. They make it very clear to the reader what you believe the issue is. And I made several comments on that this week, again, because it helps add specifics and clarity to make it easier for the reader to follow your breadcrumbs. Think about this. I mean, strategic plans, if you're a consultant or if you're on the strategic planning team noted to put this project together, what you really want to do is get the people who make the decisions to say yes to your plan, right? And so it's up to you. The onus is on you to make sure that you make it as easy as you possibly can for them to follow this roadmap that is narrowing with each successive activity down to specific recommendations. So again, the message here is specifics. The message here is also the narrowing process going from very broad to much more narrow each particular week until you finally get to your recommendations and your specific implementation plan as you go forward. Okay? Hopefully this helped you a bit and helped explain some of my comments on the paper this week. All right? If you have any questions, make sure you give me a call. Take care. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.